The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to Marketing with Purpose, a segment of the Bliss Business Podcast, where we explore what it really takes for marketing leaders to create impact that goes beyond the numbers. I'm Tulio, and in each episode, we sit down with marketing experts to explore their leadership approach and strategies that drive performance and resonate with their audience. Together, we'll dive into what's working, what's not, and how purpose and empathy can transform the way brands connect with people. So let's get started. Today, I'm joined by someone I'm a big fan of, Laura Rice. She's the owner of Rice Fractional CMO. She's a growth strategy leader specializing in brand transformation, demand generation, and customer acquisition for multi-brand and franchise organizations. Laura brings nearly 3 decades of experience building scalable marketing engines across franchising, education, health and wellness, consumer brands, and even the government sector. Throughout her career, she has led integrated B2B franchise development and B2C acquisition strategies, managed multi-million-dollar marketing budgets, and developed full funnel systems designed to drive measurable enterprise growth. Most recently, she helped accelerate franchise and revenue growth through omni-channel acquisition strategies, performance analytics, and data-driven marketing execution, aligned directly with aggressive expansion goals. We're going to explore turning marketing into a revenue engine, and I'm excited to dive into how marketing leaders can transform their teams from support function into strategic drivers for sustainable growth. Laura, thanks for being with me today. I'm excited to speak with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back with you.
So before we dive in, I would love to hear, why was turning marketing into a revenue engine the topic you chose? We give a few different topics for our guests. Why did you choose that topic today? And what makes it so important, like right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times marketing was just looked at as a support function. Like, yes, our company has marketing, but now it's really, and it has been for a while, something that's really tied to all the KPIs, how we're going to drive, money for the company. It's really the thing that I always say, it's the oil of the funnel. Like, we start at the top. Marketing has to drive everything that's going to go into the funnel, that's going to create customers, create retention, create loyalty. So it's critical that it's tied to a revenue component. I've seen a lot of new jobs that are like chief revenue officer. It is definitely something that, is prevalent these days, where that person could be over top of sales, operations, the customer experience, and marketing. So all of those verticals are very aligned, and they should be to be successful. And it just makes sense that, CMOs aren't just coming in to strategy meetings and showing campaigns and pictures. They're showing, this campaign drove this, it brought this amount of money, to the company. And, if we keep that person, here's the long-term value of what we've generated. And a lot of times when you go and ask for money as a marketer, the CFO or the finance department wants to know, well, how much revenue is that going to bring the company? Like, what am I going to see in return? And you can't say, well, that's not trackable. So I think it's just something in the world that we're in now that we want to make sure that marketing is relevant. It's not something that goes away, it's cut. And it really is a revenue driver for the business. So especially in like relationship industries, like early childhood education, home healthcare, things like that, trust and brand experience are so important, and they help create that long-term revenue, which you want, and that loyalty and those loyal customers, which is going to be, endless revenue for the company, not just always focusing on new.
Absolutely. Now, CMOs are often pulled into bridging strategy and growth, and especially fractional CMOs who often get brought in to fix what's broken or to get alignment for what's missing, or even in some cases, even just fine-tuning the branding and go-to-market strategy. So the challenge is always balancing the near-term campaign results. I need some results right now, and also building the long-term brand, which is important too. We talked about the funnel, right? You got the bottom of the funnel, that's the most immediate opportunities. But if you dry that out and you're not feeding the top of it, you're you're kind of like, you got a quarter, you're going to do well. And then what? So there's always this balance, right? How do you ensure your marketing strategy stays aligned with the company's growth goals? And where do you find the biggest friction points in making that happen?
Yeah, I think, it's really important to know what those company goals are and to build a strategy along with other verticals. So building a marketing strategy as a fractional, even if I went in and just said, what's going on with marketing, that wouldn't make any sense. I would need to talk to what's going on in sales, what's going on in operations, what does the customer journey look like? All of those pieces are critical. So I think you start with the company growth goals first, and then figure out, okay, how is marketing going to support on the short term with driving leads, like you said, like if it's seasonal business, like how are we going to pick things up during this time versus, okay, during a non-seasonal, what are we going to do to ensure, our pipeline doesn't run completely dry, which those are really like critical times. But making sure that, it's defined across all departments and we're all aligned, and meeting is really important. So having shared KPIs, I think, is really important. So it's not like, well, that's not mine, to do. Yeah, but you have a piece of, if marketing drives a lead, sales has to be in lockstep to then put that lead through the journey. And then once they become a customer, operations needs to effectively, do what they promised by making sure that the customer's happy, successful, whatever the industry is, if it's a franchisee, if it's a consumer. So balancing that, short-term lead generation with long-term brand trust is really important. So you want to keep building the brand trust with PR, different, stories like that, the feel-good stories, the blogs, the testimonials, like all of that. If you look at social media, it's full of local stories. So I think, and people that are going through the journey with that company, those are the stories that people are holding on to. So, getting everybody to buy into that is really important. The friction points comes when you, like I mentioned in the beginning, when it's really siloed. So it's like, okay, here's what's marketing's working on, but sales has never seen any of the videos, and they're the ones out talking about this. And, so it's making sure that you're sharing, communicating, you meet on a regular basis, and where are we? Do we need to adjust anything? It's definitely not a set it and forget it. It's a fluid strategy, but making sure that you're always focusing on talking to the verticals and making sure that everybody's going towards those same goals. And if there's lag, how can we, pick up in one area and make up for it?
Sometimes the friction points, the CEOs themselves, the founders themselves, who try to get a CMO to be very execution driven. They think that's all about, demand generation? Do you know about advertising? And don't realize how important of a role that is as an integrator, someone who actually will make sure that what you're telling the market is aligned with who you are inside the company. And that there is no campaign that's more effective than getting alignment with what you're telling the market. The promises you're making, if you're talking about trust and you've got a trust problem inside the organization, a good CMO will help highlight that and fix that. And that's not a marketing, that's an operational aspect. So tip for CEOs and business owners, a CMO is not just someone who's going to do campaigns. It's someone who's going to help your brand align with the promise you're making in the market.
Absolutely.
All right. But, sometimes we got high stakes situation, right? There's a brand crisis, a market downturn. In an ideal world, we can plan all this stuff out perfectly, right? So, but how do you maintain a sense of purpose and even being empathetic to what customers needs, and how to support the employees through a process like when there's a crisis or a brand market downturn? How do you maintain that sense of purpose and empathy while making quick strategic decisions? What's your system for doing that?
Yeah, I think first is clarity and transparency. So when something happens like this, you want to make sure that you're reporting back to your team on what you've learned, what's happening, because again, a lot of times the team can go into panic mode, because that's really like, this is where leaders can help, because they're like, I have to get all this done. We have to do all of these things. But I think if you stay calm, you stay transparent, they understand, okay, look, the business is shifting. Like, this is what we have to do based on what we're seeing with the results. So as a leader, you want to help your team figure out what are the high priority things that you need to do right now that are going to help impact the business, and then what things can go on the back burner, and take that burden of that decision off of their plate, and knowing that it's coming from, up top, and this is what we have to focus on. And leading with empathy is one of the things we talk about a lot, and I really love that. I think the more you treat people right, and especially them having some kind of stake in these kind of situations, can help train them on how to not be so stressed in these types of situations. Like, this is business. This is what happens. Like, we make business decisions based on, what we're seeing. So communication is important. I always say if transparent was a color, that would be me. I love to include everyone. I think marketing, we travel in packs, like we are there for each other. But these things happen. I think there's also, you want to make sure when you're finding out these types of things, you can't just go and turn off, all of your marketing campaigns. I think that's one of the things that we have to educate as marketers, other people who are not in marketing. We do a lot of educating about, the importance of not just shutting off campaigns, not just pulling dollars, like making sure that we do things very strategically so we don't kill the entire funnel. So, you want to make sure that you're being very careful.
You've got to maintain that baseline.
We got to maintain it.
Research here at Zero Company, we inked 2 white papers. I did research for 10, 15 years, both on the wealth management side of marketing and franchise marketing. And there's a baseline that produces results sometimes 2-3 quarters, even a full year later.
Oh, absolutely.
So you turn off the spigot, and you don't see the impact right away. You may not even see it for a couple of quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, a year later, you're like, what's happening? And you have no way to explain it.
No, and you're so right, because again, your timing is not everybody else's timing. Some people are just hearing about you for the first time, and they're like, what is this? I didn't even know that they, franchise this type of business or whatever. Or how am I going to get the capital to be able to do this? I love this, but it's going to take me a year to figure that out. So you want to make sure that, like you said, like you're in front of people, not completely turning everything off, especially in the times where things are down, because you want to make sure that you're hitting them with emails and getting them to follow you on social, so that when the timing is right, they choose you over a competitor or some other like-minded business.
Now, in your line of business, you've done a lot of work with franchising, which, they're launching basically new product and entering new markets all the time. So what's been like your most effective way to align? We talked about aligning sales, product, customer success teams. And where does that alignment usually tend to break down?
I think, with this, like you just said, it's definitely bringing those teams together is really important, and planning early. And also educating people that it's going to take a little longer in these markets where you don't have a presence. So boots on the ground, like depending on the business, like what, being able to be in market is really important. I think, sometimes people think if they start a business, like the doors, people are just going to flood through the doors and they're going to just have so many customers, and
wouldn't that be nice?
Without doing any work for it. So, when there's like a company just like you, a block down the road. So it's like making sure that everybody's planning early. We have shared ownership in the launch. So, it's not like, again, back to the siloed conversation. Like we want to make sure there's, clearly defined handoffs and, responsibilities throughout that customer journey, whether it's internally, like what we're doing, or we're leading a franchisee or some other customer through a journey. Regular communication. I cannot emphasize that enough, to keep the alignment strong between the different areas. And then, most of the breakdowns happen when there's not accountability. Somebody said they didn't know something. Everybody goes back to their silos after a meeting and there's no follow through. So it's like, you promised this and then, it didn't happen the way it was supposed to happen. So I think, making sure that you're, especially in these new markets, and you're fully aligned, you understand might take a little longer, but these are the steps we're going to do to get there. And we all have to be on the same page with, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Which is really important.
One of the things I love about design thinking is that the cornerstone of it is empathy. And what I love about empathy is looking beyond the transaction. It's like, my pipe burst, so I need a plumber. It's a transaction to fix the pipe. But what I really want is for that to never happen again. So what I'm looking for is someone I can trust that can do the job right permanently. That's an experience, not just a transaction. And so it's critical, like you said, to be able to look beyond just what is the immediate need, be curious about what it is that you're solving. So I'm curious about how customer insight have helped you in the past in driving strategy. Can you share time maybe when a customer feedback or behavior data completely shifted your campaign direction? Maybe you had a plan, it looked perfect, but then you heard things from users or customers that gave you different insights.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes doesn't always match up with the data, but the actual words that are coming out of the mouths of the people consuming the product or the service tell you the true story of what's going on. How did that maybe teach you how to balance intuition with analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is, in my world, it's marketing and sales. So it's like we're driving leads to a sales team who is then getting on the phone with these people and having conversations, which is where that feedback loop comes in. I think that's very critical of like, well, what did they say? Why did they drop off? Looking in the funnel, like, where did they drop off? What was the reasons? And then taking that information and going back and, creating an ad that looks like that, creating an email out to your database that might address an issue that, people are having. And I think that is really critical. One of the things we learned is that, at my last place with early education is that there's more than one customer, right? So you have people that want to come there because, they want to purchase it because they want to leave a legacy for their family. There's people that, want to give back to their community. There's people that want to leave the corporate world. There's multiple reasons why, and learning what those reasons are, that whole human side of it, helps you then grow and create testimonial videos that speak to those types of people that did the same thing. And then you can see yourself. We want to create that visual of, I can see myself doing that. And so that's what marketing does. That's what we look at, is like, we look at the customer and how they feel, and we want to, it's an emotional decision. So when we don't get that, that's where the friction happens. So if there's, the sales team potentially isn't using the system like they're supposed to be doing, there isn't regular communication. We're not finding out from operations like how the franchisees or the customers are actually feeling or doing in their locations. That is where you struggle, and you keep doing the same rinse and repeat, and you're just going to have the same issues. The can gets kicked further down the road. So what I loved was creating those testimonial videos. Like we just talked about, you talked about with the plumber. It's like nobody wants to deal with a cracked pipe. So it's like, the water's bursting everywhere. There's, it's ruined half their basement, whatever the case may be. You want somebody to come there and fix it and have a good experience, because then they're going to go talk about their experience. And that kind of marketing is priceless. Those word of mouth marketing efforts that are happening from happy people is the best marketing that you could have, because that shows from a third party what their experience was like, not somebody from marketing that's jumping into social media and making a comment. So I think all of that, and you have to really care. I think marketing people really care. We have that inherent empathy. Yeah. Like we want people to have a good experience. We put ourselves in their shoes. Okay, well, I love that campaign, but when they call, what's going to happen? Like nobody's thought of that. And that's not good. So these are the things, there's some people that just want to rush and execute, but we're not thinking about all those steps that we need to take. So, and all those behaviors, we learn things within the customer journey, like when they call the enrollment center or the call center, like you're listening to the calls and be like, oh my gosh, this just happened. We need to put in a process in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. So it's all those types of things. It's not even just hearing from the customer. It's like listening to what they just went through and adjusting. And I'm always say, if you see something, say something, do something about it. And, every time you turn over a rock, something else comes out, but you got to fix it. It's important. All those things are important.
You said something interesting. There really are two types of marketers. They're the spin masters who know how to use natural language processing language and manipulative tactics to basically manipulate markets. Yeah. But the most effective marketers are actually those who are of service to others, the servant leader, the one who actually cares about what's going on with the customer and the brand and the market and the employees and the alignment that happens across the board. Those are usually the one that outperform those who are basically the spin masters. So,
absolutely. I mean, and Tulio, it even gets to the point of like, I didn't want to drive a ton of leads to a business development representative that I knew the calls weren't going to be successful, because we could easily turn on the faucet and drive in so many leads, but we want to drive in quality leads and make sure that those are quality conversations so that it'll help the business versus
and you have people that are trained that will actually speak in a way that represent what you're telling in the market.
yeah,
The plumber example, right? You might be a franchise and your promise is that it's going to be a painless experience. And then you might have the person who shows up, who's rude, who doesn't speak. I mean, you got to train those people too. That's part of marketing as well. It's like the entire touch point with every customer is part of the journey that has to be owned by marketing.
that is so true. Yes.
And silos are the friction points of business. They're the enemy of business. Silos are friction points. So an effective CMO has to have carte blanche to just go across the aisle everywhere and just do what needs to happen to get alignment. So now let's get back to the topic that we chose today, right? Turning marketing into a revenue engine. What's worked best for you in turning marketing into a revenue driver at companies you've served before? Do you have a system that you sort of go to? And then where do you typically see the biggest gaps? Is it in the CRM implementation, the lead tracking, how sales aligns around marketing, whether they're properly converting or getting the right training? That makes it hard to measure the success. Where do you see typically the misalignments?
Yeah, you kind of covered some of it in describing it, because I think, strong CRM integration is critical, and lead tracking are essential for revenue focused marketing. I mean, when we set up a CRM, because a lot of us have done that before, there's a lot of things that need to go in there to be able to get the data that we need to then get more leads or, customers like those customers. But unfortunately, marketing is typically the one that's really like, that cares about that data that goes into the system. There's other people that, don't necessarily pay attention. And that's where there can be a breakdown, because a lot of things are set up in the CRM to really help drive at each stage of that funnel. So having visibility across the funnel helps identify, where leads are converting and dropping off. So it's like, okay, how can we get more people to this stage? And then if they're dropping off, how can we get more to convert? Like, what can we do? Like we just talked about it a minute ago. So what can we find out about those people that impacted their decisions? I think sometimes with sales, they focus more on like speed to lead, and which is very important. Like we do need to have like something in place to get back to people, but it's also, how many times are you contacting them? Are we turning them off? Like, what does that look like? So making sure that journey is not overwhelming. Again, their timing is not our timing. So we want to make sure we set ourselves through this journey. And did we like that? Did we enjoy that? Is it too much? And sometimes I think, with sales, it's just like close versus what was the experience like for the customers. So that marketing and sales alignment is really critical for accurate performance measurement. And one of the things this has been through my entire career is, the multi-touch customer journey, the attributions of what is happening with leads before they get into your system. So I haven't really met anyone that can track a whole full like customer before they actually convert to a customer, all the steps they took. But I think a lot of times, sales teams can get wrapped up on what that last touch attribution was and get a prejudice against that type of lead source when the person probably did 30 things before, so they're like, well, turn off LinkedIn. I'm like, well, wait a minute. They might've, that's where they converted, but or whatever it's a little bit expensive, but that, that's where they are though. We've seen that our customers are there.
You got to meet customers where they are. You can't force them to join where you are.
Exactly.
That's just, you can't work around that.
Yes. But accurate data is always the number one thing. And it's sometimes it's not that easy to get.
Let's dig in a little bit about your leadership. What's your approach for developing marketing talent? How do you help them hit performance goals, but also stay engaged and inspired? And where do you see leaders typically struggle the most in retaining their best people?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, with being almost 30 years into doing this, I've walked in a lot of their shoes, which, that shows empathy right there. Like I know how long something takes. I know what the effort is to do something. I know the expectations typically that are given by another department is, probably not realistic. So just helping to make them, feel supported, set clear expectations, make sure that we're investing in development and growth. So giving them opportunities to attend webinars or go to conferences, but also creating a culture where we're meeting all the time. There's, open communication. You can say anything and get feedback. So it's, very normal. Like it's not something like people are afraid to talk. High performers stay engaged when they feel challenged. So giving people opportunities. I've always been a person that helps, bring people to the forefront and let them go into strategy meetings, present this and that. And I think a lot of times people lose, talent because they're focused so much on the outcomes of what may have happened at a certain period of time versus the growth and purpose and the long-term value that somebody brings. And so I want to always make people feel like they're supported and valued and give them opportunities. If they hear something they want to work on, let's go.
Beautiful.
Try it.
Speaking of purpose, how does purpose and empathy shape the way you approach marketing today? And maybe can you share a personal story where your work maybe had a meaningful impact on a customer or even an employee?
Of course. Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked a lot of times, like empathy, like helps shape both internal and external brands. So it's what everything is driven off of is empathy and purpose. And so the more you have, like in these industries, like early education, the service industries that we've talked about, they're highly emotional and they're trust driven. So creating that and having people that you can tell when you talk to them, this is real. Like she actually does have all of these feelings. And I think marketing should focus on that connection, building confidence. We're not just promoting here. Like we are trying to create relationships, and relationships is what has driven me my entire career. And I thank God for them. And if it's not embedded, internally, you're just going to suffer. Empathy naturally strengthens the customer experience. And so if your people on the phones have empathy or show empathy, everything's going to be so much better when you go into a location, like you said. And, what really, for me, I think there was a lot of stories like this that helped change me and be happy with what I was doing at my last, in the early education space. But seeing people getting their, being able to change their lives with the vehicle of franchising and through this early education opportunity was just very heartwarming. It gave me purpose. We knew we were helping people, like, their dreams were coming true. And we wanted to make sure that they had the best experience possible. And I think, the key takeaway for everything, people invest in brands, but commit to missions that are aligned to their values and identities. So making sure that if your mission is strong, you're out there with your mission, you're making people feel like they're part of something bigger, and you care about them, not just getting them through the door, but care about their success once they're there. Those types of things will live on forever, and your brand will be fantastic.
Absolutely. Laura, thank you for joining us on the Marketing with Purpose series today.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I appreciate it.
I hope today's conversation sparked new ideas on how you can align strategy, execution, and purpose in your own work. If you found value in this discussion, please like it, subscribe, and share it to keep the conversation going. And remember, great marketing doesn't just sell, it serves. See you next time.